أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها النبي إذا جاءك المؤمنات يبايعنك على ألا يشركن بالله شيئا ولا يسرقن ولا يزنين ولا يقتلن أولادهن ولا يأتين ببهتان يفترينه بين أيديهن وأرجلهن ولا يعصينك في معروف فبايعهن واستغفر لهن الله إن الله غفور رحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتولوا قوما غضب الله عليهم قد يئسوا من الآخرة كما يئس الكفار من أصحاب القبور. So last week we covered the ayat until ayah number 13, and the past ayat had discussed, and this part is a continuation of that, in which when believing women come to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, traveling to them, that they should be tested, and that was discussed, and the laws and rules in relations to their acceptance of Islam in eyes of the treaties of Hudaybiyah made at that time, and the order of Allah above all of this was mentioned and clarified in that ayah. In that, many benefits of the marriage, what the role it plays in a Muslim society, all of these things can be envisioned over there. And the spirit of these ayat, Allah Azza wa Jal ends, for example, ayah number 11 with Wallahu Alimul Hakim, that Allah is all knowledgeable of the Sharia, all knowledgeable of everything, but in specific of the Sharia, because the ayah is speaking about the Sharia. And Allah's ilm of the Sharia and what He's bestowing upon mankind and Muslims in specific of the law is for their benefit, which is coupled then with Hakim, that His laws and orders are forever what is best for mankind and forever what could be best for the human population. So Muslim law, it exemplifies the best merit and law that humankind can live by. And so moving on to ayah number 13 now. In this ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal discusses the bay'ah, which is the pledge taken by the women at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this is a very important ayat, and they mention many important things. And the bay'ah, the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had taken a pledge with the women, the same way he took a pledge with the men. We know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took a pledge with the Sahaba, the men, at several different times. For example, the Ansar in Bayatul Aqaba, which is before Hijrah, right? In preparation of Hijrah, or Shajaratul Ridwan, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at the time of Hudaybiyah, when the news of the death or murder of Uthman radiallahu anhu had spread, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took a pledge with them that they would fight with him, enter Makkah Mukarramah and fight for the blood of Uthman radiallahu anhu. Right? And in those ayat, Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed that Allah is pleased, rida, He's pleased with the people that bay'u, that took the pledge, right, tahta shajara, under the tree. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took bay'ah. This was something often common he did, right? And the term bay'ah is used, right, which literally comes from ba', which means to extend one's hand, right? So bay'ah is a practice which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, which is, number one, theologically binding, spiritually binding and beneficial, and third, politically as well in this context. Bay'ah can be of different types. A pledge can be of different types. And so the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum continued this practice as well. For example, Umar radhiyallahu anhu took bay'ah with people during his khilafah as well. And the Sahaba continued this practice. And Tabi'un took bay'ah, pledge, with the Sahaba as well. What did they take it on? They took it for their islah. For example, just like the believing women in this ayah, you'll notice, took bay'ah, pledge with Rasulullah ﷺ for things of their own islah, rectification. This practice continued. And it also continued for the sake of defending the alam of Islam, the world of Islam as well. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu idha ja'aka al-mu'minatu yubayi'naka, that, O Prophet, when the believing women come to you, pledging allegiance to you. So the Mufassirun have various opinions in tafsir of this ayah. One being that this ayah is revealed later in Surah Al-Mumtahanah, and it refers to after fath, after conquest. Right? What was being discussed before in the surah was discussing matters before fath, before conquest of Makkah, which discussed, the matters of the Muslims in Medina. But these ayat, because the instance of bay'ah, one of the clear instances of bay'ah of the women was after fath, after conquest. Rasulullah ﷺ at Mount Safa at some point the women had gathered there and they performed bay'ah with Rasulullah ﷺ. But some Mufassirun mentioned that perhaps it could have been at various occasions before that as well, even if we don't have any reports. For example, when the women came to Medina Munawwara, at times Rasulullah ﷺ would do bay'ah. And some of the Mufassirun mentioned that this is referring to when Rasulullah ﷺ would test them. So the test, imtihan, which this surah discusses, and the surah is named after, this imtihan is referring to this bay'ah as well. And so there's different narrations which state this. And the muhaddithun have their own way of placing it all together. إِذَا جَاءَكَ الْمُؤْمِنَاتُ يُبَايِعْنَكَ, when the believing women come to you, pledging allegiance to you. It's also importantly that it must be understood that when Rasulullah ﷺ performed bay'ah with the men, they actually physically put their hand in the hand of Rasulullah ﷺ. But when he performed bay'ah with the women, all scholars have agreement. Right? This is not a difference of opinion. All scholars have agreement, as the different tafsir mentioned, that there's ijma', consensus, that the hands of the women did not touch the hands of Rasulullah ﷺ, and that Rasulullah ﷺ never touched a non-mahram woman ever. Bukhari mentions a clear hadith. Right? There's no difference of opinion over Bukhari. But in Bukhari, Rasulullah ﷺ said that my hand never touched a woman. Right? So that's one clear narration. But besides that as well, there are other narrations that state what happened. For example, that the women had known of this practice of bay'ah, and so they extended their hand. But Rasulullah ﷺ said, "Inni la usafihun nisa." I do not shake the hands of women. So from this, this is why the ulama obviously then take an understanding, which is that it is impermissible if such an important thing, spiritual thing, and such a pure person like Rasulullah ﷺ is not touching the hands of the non-mahram woman. Right? And some of the narrations also mention, right, that Rasulullah ﷺ was actually behind a curtain, and the women were behind the curtain inside, gathered in a house or whatever. And then they asked, should we extend our hand beyond the curtain, whether it was a curtain or wherever they were? Should we extend our hand? And Rasulullah ﷺ responded in different ways that no. Another report mentions also, and Allah knows best, right? But another report mentions that Rasulullah ﷺ dipped his hand in water and he gave that water to them and they dipped their hands in that water as well. But the point being that this is Pledge of Allegiance is by the tongue, by the heart primarily, then by the tongue. Right? Now it's interesting, why did Rasulullah ﷺ even extend his hand to the men? What's the benefit of it? If they could just do this by their heart and their tongue, why extend the hand? And why was this practice taken? And why is it still practiced by the ulama? And Allah knows best, but some of the ulama mentioned that what happened to the Messenger of Allah ﷺ when he first received revelation, when Allah enlightened and illuminated his soul, Jibreel alayhi salam embraced. Right? The hadith mentions Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam embraced the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says he embraced me very strongly. So there is a physical component to these things, which can be very extremely beneficial, specifically if the person whom the bay'ah is being done with is worthy of that and is doing it properly. So what was the bay'ah, this pledge taken upon? عَلَىٰ أَلَّا يُشْرِكْنَ بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا, that they shall never associate anything with Allah. So ishraq primarily, of course, being that they must not ever associate a partner to Allah Azza wa Jal. And if they associate a partner to Allah Azza wa Jal, then they would come under the ruling of the people who have become murtad, left Islam. And Rasulullah ﷺ was later commanded that in Jaziratul Arab, because Makkah and Medina must only have dwellers of believers, that they shall be asked to either believe or their life will be taken. This is the reports that come in the authentic hadith in the seerah on how Rasulullah ﷺ dealt with shirk later on. So there is no room for shirk in Jaziratul Arab. وَلَا يَسْرِقْنَا, and that they would not steal. The Mufassirun mention that this ayah is specifically drawing out things that the women would do in Jahiliyyah, and that the women were perhaps known to do more in Jahiliyyah, which is the reason why they are commanded not to do these things. وَلَا يَسْرِقْنَا, that they must not steal. Now this is also what is important here, is that I mentioned in the beginning, Rasulullah ﷺ took bay'ah with the men and he took it with the women, meaning that women are spiritually just as responsible for society as men. If you look at the type of commands here, besides shirk, which is primarily individual and spiritual, the rest of them have to do with society. وَلَا يَسْرِقْنَا وَلَا يَزْنِينَا وَلَا يَقْتُلْنَا. All social crimes that could take place. Social crimes have a punishment known as a had. Rasulullah ﷺ established by the order of Allah Azza wa Jal, the had, hudud, which are capital punishments. This is for the benefit of society, so that law and order is kept. But women play an extremely important role in society. Not only, number one, that women are mukallaf, right? The Sharia is directed to them equally, like it is directed to the men, even although its detailed tenets may differ. Rasulullah ﷺ said that they are naqisatu deen. Women they have a slight decrease or less amount of responsibility in deen compared to men. For example, men have to perform jihad. Men are supposed to do other things. Men do not ever have days where they don't pray, right? And many other actions which are only directed to men. But they still, in their share of the hereafter, in their share of responsibility in this dunya and in the hereafter, are on an equal platform. And in their influence on society, the mujtama, their influence is extremely powerful. Right? So even if, for example, men, whether socially or whether from an ideological perspective, whatever's perspective it is, if men are at the forefront of running government and running society, it's important to understand the place of a woman, which is women are the fuel of men. Right? Women fuel men. So even if a man thinks he's not influenced, right, men are influenced by women, and so indirectly they have a very strong influence on society. And even Rasulullah ﷺ, right? But when we say influence, a good influence, right? Rasulullah ﷺ at the time of Hudaybiyah, when the Sahaba were shocked that we're not allowed to enter to do Umrah, what should we do? We brought our camels, and we've came here to perform Umrah, and we'll fight for the cause of Allah for this. But Rasulullah ﷺ told them otherwise. he spoke to his wife, al-Mu'mineen radiallahu anha. And his wife, as some of the ulama mentioned, she gave great wisdom, one of the most best wisdoms, right, which was, O Rasulullah, to calm their confusion, go out and start shaving your head from now. Right? Shave your head from now and show to them, guide them what they should do practically. And so Rasulullah went and he did this, and the Sahaba all followed, all the commotion went away and everyone calmed down. All the anger went away and everyone calmed down. So, the mashwara came from who? The wife of Rasulullah. Right? So, the importance of this being that the piety of a woman is extremely important. The piety of a woman is extremely important. So, وَلَا يَسْرِقْنَا, that they must not steal. The Mufassirun mentioned that this was an action attributed to the women of the at the time of Jahiliyyah more so. وَلَا يَزْنِينَ, nor shall they commit zina, which is fornication. وَلَا يَزْنِينَ, that they will never, an oath that they will never commit fornication. Now when this had taken place after Fath, there's a narration mentioned that Rasulullah ﷺ, as I mentioned earlier, did bay'ah with the women, and after Fath on Safa, the Mount of Safa. And over there's a detailed narration that there were many women that were gathered, from them Hind bint Utbah, who she was the one who had mutilated Hamza radiallahu anhu and even ate from his body. So she feared that she would be recognized and that Rasulullah ﷺ would never forgive her. So first she was hiding, but then she said something, and then she said another thing, and Rasulullah ﷺ recognized her. So then she came forward and she said to Rasulullah ﷺ that, O Rasulullah, you are Allah and His Messenger are the most merciful, forgive me. And so Rasulullah ﷺ said, I have forgiven you. I have forgiven you. When Rasulullah ﷺ said, وَلَا يَسْرِقْنَا, that take the pledge of allegiance that you must not steal, Hind radiallahu anha said a very interesting thing. She said that, but sometimes I take without telling my husband from his wealth, Abu Sufyan. Right? And the reason being, she said, فَإِنَّهُ مِسِّيكٌ, he's someone who holds on to his wealth a lot. He doesn't give. Right? So then Rasulullah ﷺ told her, take what you need necessary, kuli, right? Using the word food, eat, meaning take what's necessary, even if he doesn't know. Another hadith in Mishkat as well mentions this, that Rasulullah ﷺ at this instant told her, take without, why? Because this is her right. Right? There are certain rights which she must be given by her husband, and it's her right. So Rasulullah ﷺ told her, take for wawaladak, take for yourself and for your children, without, even if he doesn't know. Abu Sufyan radhiallahu anhu was there, and according to one narration, so then, because when she said this, she said it out of repentance, that I feel bad, I've been doing this. So Abu Sufyan radhiallahu anhu said to her, don't worry, whatever you took in the future and whatever you're going to take, it's halalun lak, it is permissible for you. It is permissible for you. وَلَا يَزْنِينَ, and they should not commit adultery. So then Hind radiallahu anha also at this instant said, أَوَتَزْنِ الْحُرَّةِ, that can a free woman commit zina? And what did this mean? This means various things. Number one, some of the scholars say that perhaps she said this because in her knowledge, she assumed that no one else would commit zina. Secondly, perhaps why she said this, some of the Mufassirun, when going into the narration, mentioned that practically at that time, fornication was much more spread out amongst the slaves than it was amongst the free people. And those who were free that perhaps participated in this were those that sold their body. Right? So regardless, they were a certain specific group of people, and Hind radiallahu anha was kind of shocked that we're taking an oath on this. But there's a great wisdom. Why are the greatest of people stepping on earth, that's ever stepped on earth, why are they taking, yani, and the bay'at, the wordings differ in many different places, but in specific, the Quran is mentioning these words of the bay'at, of the pledge. Why are they being told to take a pledge of such actions? Not stealing, no fornication, no murdering of the children, right, which comes later. Why are they being taken on this? Because in reality, no matter, a Muslim society, even though their deen guides them to the highest level of morality, but people are people. People are people, and human beings, if they were to be perfect, then what did Rasulullah ﷺ say? That Allah Azza wa Jal would replace them with people who would sin. Because Allah Azza wa Jal's names, this is the Amr Takwini, Allah Azza wa Jal's names must manifest at all places and all times, and in different occasions. His name, one of his names that manifests amongst his servants is Ghaffar, that he's most forgiving. If there's no one to forgive, then ontologically speaking, right, the people would not exist. If there was no one to forgive, then those people would not exist. Right? So they exist because Allah's name is manifesting in His takween, in His creation of this world's ontology. Right? And beyond that, a point being, many times people say, instead of looking at the beauty of Islamic history in Muslim civilizations, many of us, we say, oh, well, they did this, and the kings did this, and the people did this. Yeah, the Sahaba, the greatest people that ever came on the earth, right? We know in certain narrations that, the hudud at their time, capital punishments, Rasulullah ﷺ himself administered. This doesn't take away from their rank. We know, for example, Ma'az al-Aslami radiallahu anhu. Right? Imagine what a person this is, right? Who, happened to fall into adultery. Radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him. But what happened after? He came to Rasulullah. This is individual responsibility. Right? If someone commits a crime, they don't usually come forward with it. Why would a person come forward with it? Ma'az radiallahu anhu, such a iman, such a spirituality, such a responsibility and accountability, that he came to Rasulullah, he said, Tahirni, purify me. Because he could not take, who does this? What type of people do this? Only people who are really accountable. People like me, what do I do? If I know I'm accountable, but I will tell myself, no, I didn't do anything wrong, right? I try to make every justification so that I'm not accountable. Right? Whereas the Sahaba took themselves to account. And when Ma'az al-Aslami radiallahu anhu, for example, after the the punishment was administered, what did Rasulullah ﷺ say? That if the tawbah that in face of his tawbah, the forgiveness that Allah blessed him with, if that forgiveness was spread on the entire earth would be forgiven. Right? So, again, the Muslim society and Muslims, should not and do not claim perfection. Yes, their system of belief is perfect, but they themselves are, they fall weak and they fall short in administering and performing this perfect sharia which Allah Azza wa Jalla has blessed them with, which is why there must be rules and laws in place. وَلَا يَقْتُلْنَ أَوْلَادَهُنْ, and they shall not, nor shall they kill their children. This referred to, in a few aspects, the time of Jahiliyyah. They were known at times, sometimes, it wasn't something extremely spread out, but it was something that happened that due to fear of poverty or to the regret of having a daughter, that some of the people would, take the life of their children. Now, why is it being attributed to the women for example, when the men did it as well. Some of the Mufassirun mentioned perhaps because they allowed it to happen as well. Right? That's number one being. Or number two being because dominantly life starts from the mother. The life of the child starts from the mother. And the life is in the hands of the mother. And not only is this referring to after the child's birth, but before the child's birth as well, which is, for example, isqatul ajinna, which is to perform abortion, basically, to do abortion. It's very interesting that this is being mentioned here, and it's mentioned in different places as well. But over here in specific, two attributed to women, because in other places Allah Azza wa Jal, for example, commands, وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ. Do not, and this is a command which, although directly is male in its linguistic pronoun, however, it's directed to all, because in Arabia there's the rule of taghlib, which is known that many of times the sigha, the pronoun which is used is directed to men, but it's referring to women and the entire society. But over here, Allah Azza wa Jalla is directly speaking to the women. وَلَا يَقْتُلْنَ أَوْلَادَهُنَّ, that do not take the life of your children. And we know that in Islam abortion is haram, and there's no difference of opinion over this. And if you want more details of that, that's a discussion of fiqh, which requires much more detail. But why is it, for example, if you just think about this a little bit, when you go to vote, abortion is a question that's asked. Right? It's, politics is directly influenced by ethics. Right? And it should be informed by ethics. Why is this question important to society? The reason this question is important to society has many reasons. But one reason also being the right of a woman, which is today very much misunderstood, and it's the idea of it is corrupted, of what is the right of a woman. And this is because of many past philosophies. You have to study the philosophies of the Western mindset, right? So, coming from, the time of enlightenment of Europe, all the way to, modernism and postmodernity, these are actual philosophies. You study them in books of, history of philosophy and things like that, right? And, so these things are connected directly with philosophies, for example, philosophies of liberty, freedom, right? That, people should individually have freedom to do whatever they want. And, what that means and how that would be criticized from an Islamic lens, that requires its own discussion. What is freedom in Islam? And that's what's important to be understood. Right? And, Western philosophy is influenced by a paradigm of humanistic philosophy, which is the idea that, the human experience as an individual is primary in anything. So people as individuals and their rights and their experience and their pleasures is put before anything else. Right? Meaning, ethics must be subjugated to human inclinations. Right? Human inclinations. So whether something is ethically to be right, in Islam, we differentiate between, human action and human rights and, just human nature and ethics. Ethics, which is morality, right? Sharia, law, or akhlaq. We believe that this comes from Allah and Sharia, and the Quran, and Wahy, and Revelation. And primarily, this comes from there, and we must take it from there. This is why we do not use aql, we do not use logic or inferential knowledge only to understand what is right to do versus what is wrong. The reason many of times why we're confused and why there's so many differences of opinion is because we're relying on a very subjective version of our mind. So everyone now has their own idea of what's right. But we have an objective source of knowledge, which is naqal, which is revelation. And the relationship between revelation and the mind, the scholars give the example, is like the relationship of the candle and the eyes. The candle is like revelation, it gives light. The eyes have the capacity to see. If you take the light away, the eyes can't see. So you need both, yes. Without the eyes, if you just have the light, you won't be able to see, if you don't have the capacity to see. So they have a very strong interplay and relationship. But there's a system which the ulama have identified and understood on how we understand and study the Sharia. وَلَا يَأْتِينَ بِبُهْتَانٍ وَلَا يَأْتِينَ بِبُهْتَانٍ يَفْتَرِينَهُ بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِنَّ وَأَرْجُلِهِنَّ. Nor shall they come forth with a forge or a lie. So وَلَا يَأْتِينَ بِبُهْتَانٍ, they should not come with a buhtan. Buhtan is a created lie, a slander, a created lie. Slander is the word we would use for it generally when it refers to others, but it doesn't always necessarily refer to others. And the translator here has put in some brackets, some notes, but we'll explain that. يَفْتَرِينَهُ, that they create from themselves. So one of the mufassirs, Tahir ibn Ashur rahimahullah, he mentions in detail of what this could mean depending on the word usage. Because buhtan is also a lie, and yaftarinahu is also a lie. Right? So what's depending on the difference? Now when two words which have the same synonymous meaning come together in one sentence, then they have different meanings. So according to the rules of balagha, what could this mean? So he mentions a few different meanings. One being that, what would be done at that time, and perhaps what still happens and is done, is that a woman would lie that she is, whether, she's pregnant with the child of her husband, and in reality she's pregnant with the child of another person, or that, she's bearing a child, and that in itself is a lie. Right? So Tahir ibn Ashur rahimahullah, he says that, for example, at Jahiliyyah times they would do something to make their belly look, swollen or inflated, so that they could show to their husbands that they were bearing the child, and the husband would have mercy upon them and wouldn't separate from them, or for whatever reason. And then, they would remain, and then when the time would come, of there actually being a child, either they'd, create another lie, or either they would bring a child which is not actually the child of the husband. So these were acts of jahiliyyah, things at that time, of ignorance that they did, and was part of the culture, what was known. بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِنَّ وَأَرْجُلِهِنَّ, from between their own hands and legs. One of the meanings of this, why say their own hands? One meaning being, number one, the lie that comes from the tongue, the fact that they're lying from their tongue. And number two, the lie of their action, that, for example, if they commit adultery, then they, further lie after, their privates being, involved in a haram action, but they lie to their husbands, right, about what happened. So, regardless, these actions are all things which there's a state law placed in order by Allah Azza wa Jalla and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam for all these things. In Surah An-Nur, for example, false claims like these are dealt with. Right? False claims like these in Surah An-Nur are specified and detailed. وَلَا يَعْصِينَكَ فِي مَعْرُوفٍ, and nor shall they disobey you in any rightful thing. So, وَلَا يَعْصِينَكَ, Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَلَا يَعْصِينَكَ فِي مَعْرُوفٍ, that they will not disobey you in anything good. Why say in anything good? Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would only command towards something good. Why specify fi ma'ruf? Allah Azza wa Jalla could have simply said, وَلَا يَعْصِينَكَ, and do not disobey you. Right? But ma'asiyah, disobedience here is being conditioned, being given a clause, a condition. One of the opinions and reasons for this, one of the Mufassirun mentions, is to explain to the women, right, that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam knows what's best for you. Whatever he commands you with, take it and understand that is what is best for you. So Allah Azza wa Jal, in essence, by saying fi ma'roof, by reiterating fi ma'roof, right, in anything good is to explain that Rasulullah ﷺ only commands towards good. So whether it makes sense to you or not, follow it. And this is a very important meaning, an important, understanding. Just like, us men at many of times, we want to use our mind to understand the commandments of Rasulullah ﷺ. We are also taught the etiquette, which is what? When Rasulullah ﷺ says something, stop. Don't try to test it. Don't try to see, from what angle is it right. No, it is right. It is right. And Muslims must think from this in lens first. But the women as well, because women also have their mind, and they also think, as they rightfully do, they might also think, why are we being commanded this, right? Hind radiallahu anha is questioning. While, when the bay'ah is taking place, upon everything, she's questioning and mentioning claims and saying different things, right? And at some points, she even, said statements would be considered a bit harsh. But that's why they're being told that when Rasulullah ﷺ says something for you, stop there. You must obey. If the Quran's telling you what are those things, and Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, for example, specifies many different actions that Rasulullah ﷺ had the right to guide you to. For example, covering your body and how you're supposed to cover yourself. No tattoos, which is mentioned, for example, in another hadith, or no false and created changes to the body, which would be done at the time of Jahiliyyah as well. Right? Changes to the body which were not natural and not normal, right? Nor medically necessary, but because of certain ideas they had of beauty and etc. Women have their own world and their own logic and their own way of doing things. So they're being told that as a woman, this is why this ayah is so important, that as a woman, understand that you must also, even if you're women and Rasulullah ﷺ is a man, it doesn't matter. Rasulullah ﷺ, what he commands you towards, you must accept it. That is what is right for you, and that is what is best for you. Another reason being وَلَا يَعْصِينَكَ فِي مَعْرُوفٍ, that Allah Azza wa Jalla is showing mercy to them by explaining that if it's a matter of deen, you must obey. And if it's not a matter of deen, but perhaps a matter of aada, just normal life, then you may choose from this. What is the dalil or evidence for this? We know that a Sahabiya woman who, when she was freed from slavery, she separated from her husband who was still a slave. And her husband was madly in love with her, so he came to Rasulullah ﷺ and said, please tell her to not separate from me. So then he called, Rasulullah ﷺ called the woman, and this is an authentic narration. He called her and told her, he's madly in love with you. Why would you separate from him? Why don't you go back to him? So then she asked, is this an order from you, or is this in your opinion? Meaning, is this an order of Sharia, or is this just a ra'i, just a general normal opinion? And so Rasulullah ﷺ affirmed that this is not an order of the Sharia, and so she said, then I will not go back to him. Right? So if it's not a matter of deen, now the scholars in Usul al-Fiqh, for example, then explain that there are sunan of, there are those sunan which are directly attached to deen, and then there are those sunan which are known as sunanul adat, sunnahs of habits. Now, sunnahs of habit, again, they're still sunnahs. For example, using your right hand and using different things which the scholars category. But the important thing is they did differentiate between sunnahs, types of sunnahs, and other types of sunnahs which were more of habitual sunnahs of Rasulullah ﷺ. And for that reason, then they're given a lighter category in the Sharia. For example, many of them are considered mustahab, or in that manner. The sunnahs of Rasulullah ﷺ, which he guided us towards, they're all good, but some of them are not necessary. Right? Some of them are better, and we should not be, of course, lazy or want to look for a reason not to follow the sunnah. But it is an important distinction that must be made, because ihkam have to be differentiated. If you make something which is not fard, or something which is not fard into, or something which is fard into not a fard, then this would be an injustice, and this would be a misunderstanding of the Sharia. Right? So after they took pledge on all of these things, then Allah Azza wa Jal said, Allah Azza wa Jal says, فَبَايِعْهُنَّ. So then accept their allegiance. Accept their allegiance. فَبَايِعْهُنَّ. وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُنَّ اللَّهِ. And seek forgiveness for them. Inna Allah ghafur rahim. Indeed, Allah is all forgiving and mercy giving. Right. So this is important that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after all of these things, people will take pledges, make intentions, and may not always follow up with them. So this is the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jalla that He's telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So seek forgiveness for them. They will fall short, whether it's the immediate Sahaba or the rest of your ummah. Right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought forgiveness for his entire ummah. So whether it's the rest of the Muslim ummah as well, that they will fall short, they will maybe pledge, they will take intentions, and they will fall short. And that's just the idea, the part of human nature, as Rasulullah ﷺ has conveyed to us, that kullu bani Adam khata'. It is a part of the nature of naw' insani. It is part of the nature of the Adamiyin, the people, children of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, that it's written amongst in their nature to make mistakes. That is not something that can be changed. So forgiveness must be sought. Right? Forgiveness must be sought. Inna Allah ghafur rahim. Indeed, Allah is all forgiving. Inshallah, we have one ayah left of Surah Al-Mumtahanah, but we'll continue it in the coming week, inshallah. May Allah Azza wa Jalla grant us understanding of this and the ability to apply it. And may He forgive us for our shortcomings in our attempt to understand His perfect word. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين صدق الله العظيم سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك اللهم جزاكم الله خير. Inshallah, there's breakfast in the hall for everyone. I also do want to mention that in this masjid we have a program for the Muslims of Gaza, the people of Gaza, on Wednesday in this hall. So there's a flyer I believe you can see posted on the doors outside of the masjid as well. If you can support as well, and inshallah you can tell other people as well to try to join and support the program, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.